Hajime, welcome back, denizens. JT McRoberts here with you. It's time for another episode of Comic-Jutsu. Today we're going to bring you something very special from the Comic Book Dojo, as we're going to talk about Count Dante. Check that out. Now, if you're like me, you grew up reading comics from the 60s, 70s, early 80s, Count Dante was a source of fascination for you. His bizarro ads would show up in Marvel Comics in the late 60s, early 70s. I found one here digging through my back issues in the Master of Kung Fu, the hands of Shang-Chi, back when he was just good old Shang-Chi. Here you have the classic Count Dante ad proclaiming him to be the deadliest man alive. And because of this darn ad right here, I mean, this guy was pretty much mythic. I never took this serious, though. I mean, it just made me wonder, like, who is this guy? The undefeated supreme grand master of the fighting arts? Like, all this stuff. The Black Dragon Fighting Society. But anyway, I never sent off for his book, but the ads were always there. This is actually like a later version of the ad where they've photoshopped this up a little bit, though they didn't have Photoshop back in the day. I guess they just literally drew and altered the actual picture because his hair wasn't quite as shapely as that. It looks like a little, what we would call a TWA, teeny weeny afro, but we know he just had some curls there, but they weren't that tight. Scout Comics has taken it upon themselves to do an adaptation of the legendary Count Dante's story. Here they tell you on the cover, the unauthorized but sort of true story of the deadliest man who ever lived. I like the cover art. I like the interior art. Though I must say, how could they not do some version of this for the cover? Maybe they're saving that for a later issue, which I don't have any of the other issues other than this one. I wanted to judge it based on how this one appealed to me. Now, as always, in the Comic Book Dojo, we're going to do a breakdown of how the fighting styles and fight scenes are presented. So I'm not so concerned about, whether or not they've done a good job of dramatizing Count Dante's life story, but there's a lot there to dramatize. Yeah, once you start to learn about this guy, if you're interested in that sort of thing, or the Black Dragon Fighting Society, or if you want to hear about the Dojo Wars of the 70s, there are several really fascinating documentaries here on YouTube, and apparently there's a filmmaker out there that wants to tell the story of Count Dante and the Dojo Wars. But anyway, for our storytellers out there, this is an interesting framework. So they've decided, okay, we're going to try to tell the true story of this guy who basically mythologized himself and talked up every single thing he ever did. So in order to do this, they've created the framework of having one of his students be interviewed. A lot like, I guess, in, Interview with a Vampire, where you have this third party that is revealing information and background about the subject piece, the subject matter. In this case, it's John Keenan, aka Count Juan Raphael. Now, what's worthy of sharing in his story is the fact that this guy actually taught students of any race, creed, color. He was one of the early breakers of the race barriers when martial arts were first brought into America by ex-servicemen in most cases, or maybe sometimes, by immigrants such as like the Chinese that came over. They basically taught their own. Everybody taught their own kind. The Chinese only wanted to teach the Chinese. White American soldiers only wanted to teach white American soldiers. So anyway, so here we go. We have this student, Sidney Brown. I'm going to guess that this guy is just kind of an amalgamation of maybe a couple of his real students from the time. But anyway, he's being interviewed to tell the story about John Keehan. Here he tells the story of when they first met. And this is our first bit of dramatic license, so to speak, which again, as a storyteller, if you're telling a story and you're adapting a real, someone's real life to some sort of dramatic format, sometimes you can't be afraid to spice it up. According to records, Keehan never actually went to Vietnam, did everything he could to get out of it. But, he later told stories of himself fighting with Cuban revolutionaries and all kinds of other crazy things. So this is all just kind of made up here, how Keehan meets his student here, Sidney Brown. I like that. Before I go on too far, I'll say I like the artwork. The artwork has character. It's maybe not super sexy, but it works so far for this book. I like that they are using some textures on some of the pages to give it that kind of a weathered look. Like you can see, this looks like dirt or smudges on the page here on the white, but that's, it's part of the pattern of the book printing itself. Kind of, I guess, an attempt to replicate what comics of that era would have looked like when they start to fade and whatnot. They have a bit more texture to them. Texture and coloring. So this is another dramatization, which is meeting Keehan's instructor, who they place here in the military. Apparently this is a proxy for this guy. What was his name? Robert Trias, ex-military, responsible for opening some of the earliest American karate dojos in America. So by transposing all of this to Vietnam, I guess they get to avoid any potential legal entanglements in case this Trias guy doesn't, or his family doesn't like anything that's said about him in here, like such as the fact that they imply that he didn't want people of color being taught his martial arts. This is funny that they're mocking those old school Flex Mentallo ads about beefing yourself up, but this one is just like, here, we're going to sell you this pipe for $99. These ads are funny because they're in the spirit of those times, but they're kind of updated. Like the price, that's like a modern price, $99.99. That's pretty funny. Okay, so here is the first real instance of seeing any sort of martial arts. Now, let me back up. I'm moving so fast, I kind of talked my way over it because I'm not trying to break this down every single page. But here they show Count Dante, a.k.a. John Keehan, coming to rescue Sidney. He's a POW. And rather than showing him actually fighting these Viet Cong, they put it all in the gutters. It's all implied off screen, and they just show the aftermath of it, which I'm okay with. This is kind of a way to, make his fighting just unbelievable, because he's doing things that, you don't see. They're greater than anything you can possibly imagine. So that's always a good storytelling trick, whenever you can involve the audience in telling your story for you. Now this page right here, I like the way that they did this. From what I can tell, I don't have a copy of the actual book, World's Deadliest Fighting Arts, which is Count Dante's book. But I think these are all maneuvers from his book, Monkey Steals the Peach. That's the famous nut punch there. And where and why have I seen that so many times over? But allegedly there's a connection between Count Dante and the infamous Frank Dukes, he of Bloodsport infamy, the great Kumite champion. And if you remember in Bloodsport, Van Damme does that split in the nut punch there. Monkey Steals Peach. So you'll see some continuity between the two. But that's a whole nother kettle of fish and a crazy rabbit hole to fall into if we start talking about Dukes. But anyway, I like this whole little sequence. So rather than using like a lot of speed and multiple effects, they're just focusing on one and making them clear, concise, punch and block. Here's a trip, throw, sweep of some sort, foot sweep, blocking a kick. Can't exactly tell what's going on right there. It must be some kind of high kick. And the monkey steals the peach. It's punch to the nuts. So here we have the stand-in for Trius getting mad that Keehan is teaching black students. So he gets mad about it. First, the student fights him, gets beat up. Keehan says, "Hey, you're not gonna beat up on him," and he jumps on him himself and gets beaten up. Of course, all of this is a fabrication. This page is okay. I mean, this takes up a whole lot of real estate. Makes this guy look like Guile on here, like straight out of Street Fighter. But it's taking up so much of the page. I like this. I would have liked to have seen, maybe some more of this. This really could have been shrunk down, but I guess I'm kind of nitpicking here. But this is cool. I like that it shows the technique. I like the quality of the holding lines on this. So it gives everything some weight and motion. And here they bring in, motion lines, action lines, using both actual inked holding lines and the coloring as well. And they carry that all the way across from impact, impact, impact to actual effect, where you see the eyeball in the close-up, almost like the opening of Mad Max, where the Knight Rider runs into the RV and explodes. But here they talk about the Dim Mak, which is funny to me because that's another. Dim Mak is like a legendary kung fu maneuver, so it's funny to me that these karate guys are talking about Dim Mak. So that's one of the things that I guess in some ways maybe that's the way that Count Dante was a bit of an innovator, in that maybe he did kind of cross study into kung fu a little bit, though his primary style was karate and judo. But so here, nothing to write home about here. We get a little bit closer to kind of that long horizontal panel choreography that we would see Frank Miller do in Daredevil or whatnot. But just focus on one kick, block, throws him down, smashes him, the end. Nothing real spectacular. Backgrounds here are really, really minimal. So there are things I don't like about this spread, but then things that I do like this is really strong. I really, really, really like that sequence. And I like the idea, as a storyteller, they're, using this as one of Keehan's good traits to make him more sympathetic and heroic, because he is the subject of this comic book. The way they're presenting this dude, he's just like straight up Nuke from Miller's Born Again, Daredevil. One thing I haven't mentioned is the coloring. I like the coloring approach. It's a very minimalistic, flat approach here. You can see the little dots, almost like the Ben-Day dots sort of thing, where they're using this kind of throwback approach to the coloring. It's good. It looks better on some pages than on others, where here it's all just predominantly brown, but when they start to put some of the other colors in, it looks nicer. Like this looks better. Here we see the student going to the club to hang out and have a good time. He's talking to a lady. Her boyfriend, who's an NFL player, gets mad, comes over to start some grief. So Keehan decides to stick up for his student. Now, something like this probably did happen a whole lot. Now, I really like this sequence. Here you can see the NFL guy is bearing down on Keehan, very big, rushing onto him. All this is okay. But I like this where he turns and you have this full-on, almost like a POV view of what Count Dante would be saying over here. And then you have all these. I'd like to know if these kanji actually are saying anything. I can't read kanji. But I'd be curious to know if these are actually saying anything. But they could have taken this even further. I mean, in one way, it reminds me of the way that Starlin embellished some of his panels and his gutter work in his early Masters of Kung Fu. He would put like fake kanji in there. But in another way, it also reminds me of like the classic karate training posters where it would have, show full figure anatomy, and then all of the weak points would be highlighted and pointed out. And on some of them, they would even tell you, like which weapon to use, hammer fist here, knuckles here, that sort of thing. So this is what I'm saying is these are all targets, weak areas. He sees it, boom, everything is instantly analyzed. Crack, there's a nice vertical fist punch. Looks like a chop, and then just a good old boxing left straight, most likely is what that looks like. So takes the guy out, no problem. Here as they're dragging him out, they say, man, he smells awful. And Sydney asks Dante, did you use the Dim Mak on him to make him poop himself? Because that's one of the things that they talk about when they talk about the Dim Mak, is you could actually use it to make someone crap their pants. Here you see more of that, of the era ads, but they're kind of slightly updated. Right here, this is the one that throws it out the window. They've got the Count Dante beard trimming kit. I mean, he did have a nice trim, okay? But down here, they've got Peyton Manning's dad bod. That totally dates it of a different time. So I won't hold that against it. I'm just pointing all that out. So he says, nope, didn't use the Dim Mak on him. He did that himself. And here they talk about opening their first dojo and basically being open to teach anyone of any race, much like Bruce Lee was doing at the exact same time. So it is interesting that this John Keehan, aka Count Dante, was doing this kind of stuff. He was like breaking down racial barriers. And honestly, I mean, the more you learn about the guy, it seems like he was really just doing it, for himself because he's an opportunist. But at the same time, I mean, there's some good that comes out of it. Here he talks about he travels like Batman, training all these different styles. This is the one that throws me, Don Chui. I have no idea what that is. Tiger style, drunken monkey, snake fist, taekwondo, jiu-jitsu. Hell, I tried boxing. Now, in reality, Keehan actually started in boxing as a youth. So he had that kind of, that hard-nosed practicality to the core of his fighting principles. Very early on, he was able to build upon that with his karate and then judo and whatever else he added to it over the years, including Dim Mak and cutting hair. Because, according to the legend, he was a hairstylist. He dated Playboy models. He walked tigers on a chain. And he fought in the dojo wars of the 70s. And that is Count Dante, the deadliest man alive. And they take a little jab at Evil Knievel there at the end. Feeble Knievel. Funny stuff. But I like the way that this is presented. It's kind of a Elseworlds take on Count Dante, if you will. But it works. I like the way the fights are presented. I like the way the martial arts are presented. And I like the framing device of the story itself. So there you go. Be sure to buy my graphic novel. If you've enjoyed this, hit the like button, subscribe, tell your friends about the channel. All that fun stuff. Go live your life, eat, drink, be merry, prosper. Come back. I'll be here with you when we're ready to dive deeper into the dojo. Thanks for watching. Mate.